tech events, and especially virtual events, which is one of the hardest to do, I would say. And we kind of bootstrapped it, and we only had 3 months to put on a conference.
Welcome to How I Made It in Marketing from Marketing Sherpa. We scour pitches from hundreds of creative leaders and uncover specific examples. Not just trending ideas or buzzword-laden schmaltz. Real-world examples to help you transform yourself as a marketer. Now, here's your host, the Senior Director of Content and Marketing at Marketing Sherpa, Daniel Burstein, to tell you about today's guest.
Early in my career, when I switched from B2C marketing to B2B marketing, I have to admit, I was a bit intimidated. B2C marketing, even if I wasn't in the customer set, I could understand the appeal and motivation. B2B marketing was so complex to me. My mentor at the time, Jerry Doobie, told me, Daniel, IT managers don't read white papers. People do. In other words, you have to connect with your audience. And underneath it all, that audience is just as human as you are, even in B2B. That lesson came rushing back to me when I read the podcast guest application from my next guest who said, B2B buyers are people too, exclamation point. This lesson is all the more important coming from her because her company's focus, her company's product uses artificial intelligence and machine learning. So I was heartened to see that her focus was on very real, ooey gooey humans and not just enterprises or algorithms. She'll teach us the story behind how she learned that lesson, along with many other lesson-filled stories. Joining me now is Maya Perry, the marketing director at Converge.io, an Intel company. Thanks for joining us, Maya.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
This is going to be a fun conversation. So let's quickly look at your background so the audience knows who I'm talking to. You are the marketing director for Converge.io for the past 4 years. The first 2 years was Converge.io was an independent company, and the past 2 years, Converge.io has been a part of Intel. You manage a direct report as well as 3 agencies. And can you give us a sense, what is your day like as a marketing director?
Oh, what is my day like? Well, even though we've been acquired for 2 years by Intel, we still run very much like a startup. We're a pretty small marketing team of just 5 people. So most of the time, I'm hopping around from, anything that has to do with Marcom. So on one day, I could be reviewing or writing a PR and working with our PR agency. Another day I could be working with Intel or partners to try and, accelerate some of the work that we're doing with them. On other days, I'm just writing marketing copy and for landing pages, for ads, working with our creative agencies to try and create PPC ads. Really everything that you can think of in marketing. I put my hand in. So that's a little bit of our day-to-day. And of course, learning more about the AI space and the market in general.
Wearing many hats. And that small team has pulled off some impressive things, including a huge conference, which we're going to get to. But let's start with how Converge.io got to be part of Intel and your role in that and what marketers can learn from that. So your lesson, you said, was how to build a marketing program from zero to acquisition. It's this: strategize, prioritize, and put in the hard work. So tell us, Maya, how did you do it?
Well, it's actually really funny because 4 years ago, exactly, beginning of August, 4 years ago, I started at Converge.io, and I had a little bit of experience doing PR. I'd worked at a PR agency. I did copywriting for a big gaming company. And I had some other startup experience. And when I was first hired, I was hired as the marketing manager, first non-R&D hire. And it was kind of funny. There were only 5 people, including most of them being very, very technical. And my interview, the test that they gave me for the marketing manager position was to do a blog post. And, in the grand scheme of things, I don't even know if they realized, and I'm not even sure that I realized, that my role would be way more than a silly blog post. I had to figure out how to build a marketing machine. Um, I also kind of had to help with sales a little bit because we didn't even have salespeople at the time. And all we had was this highly technical software. So had to learn a little bit about what AI was, what Converge.io did. By the way, it's an AI software. It helps data scientists. And eventually, we started with webinars, blog posts. We tried to work on the website, and all of that was really learning as we went. As we started to collect leads, you know, I say we, but I really mean me in the beginning and the CEO who sometimes he had a data science background, but I think pretty good intuition to get things going, especially from a marketing standpoint. So we kind of built this little program, how to get leads. That was like our number one goal, and eventually kind of grew and started to have a subscription base and started to incorporate emails, and slowly built to what we are today. And then 2 years later, we got acquired by, or we got acquired by Intel, and which is every startup marketer's dream, or startup, anybody who's joining a startup, that's really the dream, I would say. Um,
Yes, yes, absolutely. So, well, let me ask, I'm very curious about that acquisition time specifically. So, an acquisition doesn't happen all at once, right? It takes time. So, what, if anything, did you change once you first heard about the possibility of an acquisition by Intel until the acquisition was complete? So, I've written before about momentum marketing. I think it's an area we sometimes overlook, keeping the deal moving, right? Not just acquisitions, obviously, any B2B deal. We focus on the beginning sometimes, that lead acquisition, focus on the end, the final sale, but it's all too easy to overlook the middle when it takes to keep that momentum going. So when I've been part of an acquisition in my career, and which with much bigger companies, and it was all in the press and all sorts of these things, it wasn't all at once. It kind of took a while. And in the middle, I was working on sales enablement at the time, I remember. And in the middle, some of the sales groups were they were a little bit shell shocked and didn't know what to do because they were getting bought by a bigger competitor, it was Oracle, actually. And I remember one of the sales leads came in. Some of the sales leads of the different geos, I don't think they were handling as well, but one of the sales leads came in. I think the guy from New York, the finance guy, and he came in and said, "Hey, there's only one reason Oracle is buying us, because we've got the best darn software out there and they know it." And I noticed, it was such a simple insight, but that changed how the sales team dealt with the acquisition. So I just wonder, obviously it's a smaller company, maybe not in the press as much, but you knew, right? You knew. So did you change anything, or what did you do differently in that kind of middle part once you knew that the possible acquisition could take place until it finally closed?
that's a great question. So actually, the acquisition came as a pretty big shock to me, and the entire company. I knew that by the time we were already in the acquisition phase. We were about 35 people, so a bit bigger than, the 5 people that we were when I started. Um, and we did not, we thought that I knew that we were just looking for funding. It was in COVID times, and funding was not an easy thing to find. And, for many years, I had been kind of poking at our founders, kind of joking with them. Oh, I see we're having conversations with, XYZ company, and we're having conversations with them. Do you think they're going to acquire us? And it was kind of like this ongoing joke that I had with the CEO. Um, and he said, hopefully, hopefully, but he also knew, that's not really in our trajectory, and he didn't know if anything was going to happen. And we had already started conversations with some actually competitors, and we've been working with competitors of Intel for a while, and that's actually part of what makes Converge interesting, is because in a world where everything is kind of vendor locked, we're a very open platform for AI. So I think that, through our work with the other competitive partners, Intel kind of saw an opportunity to grab us. And when I found out that we would be acquired by Intel, I realized, wow, all the work that we had put in to work with even the competitive partners. That's actually what ended up making us helped us get acquired by Intel. And I was super excited to be acquired by Intel because, Intel is really starting to become more of a software leader. They've always been into hardware, and it's really nice to be part of realizing that dream and also the AI software specifically. So it's a really nice opportunity, and I've loved working for Intel ever since. And to be a startup, after 3 years working at a startup, it was a dream come true to see some corporate structure. And that was what was magical about it.
Well, what advice would you give to other marketers who are in your shoes where you're kind of a small startup, you get acquired by a big company? I think you might be a bit of a unique situation. You're still independent. You're just not totally gobbled up. But as you said, small startup, very different atmosphere, just very different way things move. You're only 5 people when you started. But also, moving into that big organization, on the upside, there's more resources. On the flip side, I would think, other things are harder, brand use. So do you have any specific advice? It's the dream, right? Like you said, either,
Yeah.
IPO or, capital funding or getting bought. But then once the dream becomes reality, once the dog catches the FedEx truck or something, what do you do then?
No, that's a really great question. And I actually have a very good answer. Um, I think that something that big corporations are missing most of the time is that startup mentality. You'll notice, I mean, it was a big adjustment for me going into Intel and realizing things move very slowly. And I had some experience with that before because we've worked with very big partners like Dell Technologies and, Red Hat and some other big technology organizations. And they also, move slowly. Um, and then once Converge came into Intel, with that startup mentality, they looked to us to get things done because we still have that drive and that quick, hands-on mentality. And I think that for you to be successful, or for anybody who's going through an acquisition to be successful, you really need to keep that mentality, and don't fall into the corporate trap. Remember that you were always interested in working in the fast-paced environment, and it's way more exciting. So, and you have a lot to bring to a big corporation if you keep that mentality, and you'll probably go really far.
Okay, great. Let's get into your next lesson. So now we're talking about some actual marketing you did while at Converge.io. You said how to build content when no one understands your field. Expert guess, and especially seems like I've worked in software and tech too, and as a marketer, as a creative, you mentioned you started as a writer. I started as a writer. I mean, I understood it well enough to communicate it, but it's a bit of gobbledygook. Your stuff seems especially complex. So how did you use expert guests to create that content and that marketing?
Yeah, so as a really small team, in a very highly technical field, I'm sure that, most B2B marketers are also thinking, okay, I have this challenge or a highly technical, to find somebody who can actually write on data science or AI or whatever technical field you're in. It's really hard to find writers in that field. So, but content is king. In order to do marketing, you really need knowledgeable and very valuable content that is understandable by your audience. And so trying to find content was one of our biggest challenges and still remains one of our biggest challenges today. And what we did, or how we started, was to start a webinar. It also probably could have been done with a podcast, but at the time we just knew how to use Zoom, so we used a webinar, and we involved all the technical people in our team and invited them onto our webinar. We also invited partners and other technical people that could, speak on the topics that were interesting to us that we would have wanted to write a blog on. And so what we did is we leveraged that. I found, new places where I could leverage that content, whether it be shorter videos, and the webinar has always been really useful, and we still get downloads on our webinars. And I also transcribed it for pretty cheap, um, edited it real quick, and was able to create, social posts from that, and blog posts and ebooks, all from that piece of content. And that was the best way for us to actually scale without having to hire, you know, technical people to write, or even saved us time, because if you do, especially in a technical field like this, I don't think data scientists want to be writers. They'll probably make way more money being a data scientist these days. So it's understandable why it's so difficult to find somebody who can write. And that was the best way we could do it. And we've since, grown our webinar audience. Really, really, it's been incredible. We started off getting maybe 50 people to a webinar, and now it's not a surprise if we get 300 people to a webinar. And that community has even led us to open up into a whole conference, with 10,000 registrants, which is pretty incredible. We have, we can talk a little bit about it more, but yeah, I think that is, and now we also use all of our conference content for other content as well.
Well, I mean, that's awesome. I'm growing from 50 people on a webinar to a conference with 10,000 attendees. That's phenomenal. So let's talk through, you're talking about content webinar. Can you guide us through the customer journey you've set up, right? So for example, we have a free digital marketing course. In session 14, Flint McLaughlin teaches structure and engagement continuum that attracts people with varying degrees of motivation, right? And I'd imagine you have that probably same thing, engagement continuum with varying degrees of motivation. There's people who are very interested in getting your, tool right now. There's people who are unsure. There's people who are just trying to learn about machine learning and data science. And there's probably many different roles within the organization too, from technical to business side. So, what is the customer journey? What is the engagement continuum for Converge.io? It sounds like some version of webinar to event to customer, and, probably missing some pieces in there.
Absolutely. Our funnel is very complex, and a lot of it has to do with timing. Timing is everything when it comes to our funnel. And the best thing, there's a lot of different platforms out there that are doing something similar to what we do. And I think that the biggest thing you can do is build a community around the topic. And I'm not sure how many people in the audience are trying to market towards developers or technical people, data scientists, but they don't like to be sold to. They want to talk, geeky, and they want to talk with other professionals and make themselves a better professional, very similar to what we would like as marketers. And I would say that, trying to engage with them and having a good brand experience where you give them value. Eventually, we've found, somebody who came to our webinar maybe 2 years ago converted maybe 2 years later, but that they've been through a long nurturing process. And eventually we were there when they realized, oh, we actually need a tool like this. Or especially when we started 3 years ago, 4 years ago, AI was not so common in general businesses. But now we're finding that like a lot of smaller companies are trying to get started with AI, and those people are really ready, and they've been going to our webinars for years, and now they know who Converge is, or they joined our conference, or they even spoke at our conference, and they're kind of hitting us up later.
I mean, I love what you say about helping people. I mean, especially technical audience, but just helping people in general. Interviewed the CMO of Dashlane, and he was telling a story how he started his career before he got into sales and marketing. He was an engineer. He was actually a hardware engineer. And then he went into a sales role and he didn't know how to do sales. So he just approached it like an engineer, which was like, all right, let's find the problem. Let's solve the problem. And it was pretty successful. And he didn't realize, oh, wow, this is not how I guess, an outsider would think you're supposed to do sales. But when it comes to marketing, when it comes to content marketing for a technical audience, for anyone really, one, that long tail where you're helping them. And like you said, in some cases, helping them for 2 years before they become a customer. And two, just really focused on, it sounds like what you're doing as an organization in general of working with a lot of different companies to actually grow your space. So you want to tell us a bit about that conference you mentioned. You grew to 10,000 people. I think, if it started as an in-person event, I know we all went through COVID and that was just wreaked havoc on conferences. So how did you go from 50 on a webinar to 10,000 at a conference? And was that also part of what you talked about of working with others in your space to just kind of grow your entire space of AI and machine learning?
Absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned COVID. We actually did it was a virtual conference. Our conference is called MLCon, Machine Learning Conference. And we started off virtual before COVID. So we were already
Okay.
equipped during COVID to really grow that conference, which was great. So our first conference, it kind of also ties into the first lesson of Be Bold, because we really had no idea how to do a conference. And as a startup, I'm sure a lot of other companies may have gone externally to try and find somebody who really knew what they were doing, but instead we kind of bootstrapped it and we connected with other companies that were also doing virtual conferences. We eventually got connected with this awesome external consultant, and her name is Lisa Gregory. She's an events agency now, but she's incredible. She's done millions and millions of tech events, and especially virtual events, which is one of the hardest to do, I would say. And we kind of bootstrapped it, and we only had 3 months to put on a conference. Originally, the CEO, as he does, he likes to just say, let's do it in 3 months. Why not? We'll just do it like we do our webinars. We'll just have, a Zoom link that people can join in. But, we wanted to be better than that, and we strive to be better than that. And I give a lot of props to our VP of marketing, who had just started at the time, Gil Weitzman. And he said, well, we don't want to just do Zoom. If we're going to do this conference, let's do it big. And it was a lot of pressure, that's for sure. We reached out to, I think the main thing to being successful is trying to find good content. And that was one of our biggest challenges. But we actually found that we used our sales team and we just asked them to look on LinkedIn for prospects, but also to try and find people who could speak on data science and AI, who were leaders in AI. And for our sales team, it was really awesome because they got to have first conversation, not trying to sell, but just a first interaction with leading data scientists that eventually maybe they would, interact with on a sales level. But this was just to ask them to come speak at our conference. And we were actually super impressed. We got 40 speakers, and we were not expecting to get 40 speakers. We were thinking, okay, we're going to have maybe 10 speakers. It will be a day. Then we had to expand. We could no longer equip a conference to have 40 speakers just on Zoom. So we had to scale. We found a conference platform. We ended up having a whole 2-day conference with like 4 tracks, just trying to get all of this content in there. And it was really incredible experience. And if you build other marketers, or other data scientists, just like other marketers, want to hear from other data scientists. So they want to hear, the applications. It's very similar to what this podcast does. Just trying to find real world applications of AI They were very excited. And, if you build it, the people will come. And we had, our first few speakers. We had to bootstrap a little and say, approach Snapchat and say, oh, yeah, we already got confirmation from Facebook and, Dell Technologies and all these other big, Bumble. So you'll be in good hands. And we kind of said the same thing to the other people. Snapchat is really interested and wants a spot. And then they all came. We were really lucky. And, you know, created an awesome event for 5,000 registrants. And to be honest, the budget was not so bad. The first go around, also the second go around, 100K maximum to get a really good group together. And those are people that we will nurture forever, and also have in our community, which we're really lucky to have.
I've been told before by teams that have heavily invested in content marketing is it allowed them to punch above their weight, right? So we had a great case study with a company in the construction software industry, worked with much bigger competitors, but they built this really community for the construction industry to recruit workers called I Build America. And they're like, hey, it brought us, they were doing that specifically to help their industry with a key pain point, with a key challenge, which is to recruit workers. But it brought them into all these sales conversations against much bigger competitors, which they wouldn't normally have had. So I wonder for you, for Converge.io, did this help you get on the radar with Intel for the acquisition? Did this help you get on the radar with customers or in conversations that you think maybe you wouldn't have had if you hadn't had essentially brought your industry together? Because it sounds like also when you're reaching out, I'm guessing there were competitors speaking on that stage as well, that virtual stage.
That's right. There were actually competitors speaking on our stage, Intel competitors as well. But when we had just been acquired actually by Intel when we started this conference. So we already were part of Intel, but still,
Okay.
The integration hadn't quite happened. But what's interesting is that since we put on that conference, our presence in Intel has become way, way higher. Because another thing is you don't think about once you are acquired, you also then have to work on trying to get your brand and your play. A lot of these acquisitions kind of fail and they drop into nothing, and you still have to work really hard to keep yourself relevant. And for us, MLCon was a huge, huge part of that. The success that they saw, we ended up this year helping Intel with their events and helping them kind of create this developer community because they were really they're really interested in reaching the developer community. And we were kind of consultants in that. And we were speaking to executives at Intel about how to really build a community. And and how to build a useful conference. So that was really awesome and shows that, we can also be the experts. The best thing is just trying and seeing how it works out.
Well, that is awesome. And I think it kind of ties into our next lesson. When you talk about building that community, you say, and I mentioned this in the opening because I love it so much. I've learned it too. B2B buyers are people too. So how did you learn that lesson? How did that tie into all your marketing and the community and everything you've built?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I think that a lot of marketers are not interested in B2B marketing. It's way less sexy. I know that when I was in school, in university, I wasn't quite interested I didn't think I would be, marketing a software. I thought, oh, I'm going to market something cool that a consumer product that is interesting or an app that I would use. But the thing is, it's not so different to market in B2B. The thing is that data scientists or whatever technical field you are in are also people. And I've had the opportunity to get to learn about what it is that they like and what they're interested in. And typically they're interested in a lot of the same things that we are. And ultimately, I've gotten the chance to test a lot of different messaging, and you want to spark an emotion with a person. And luckily, we know a little bit about what the struggles of a data scientist are. And for marketing, we certainly know what is frustrating. It could be, the CRM that we're working with, or it could, there's so many struggles, or like how to reach your audience, the high cost of ads. We have our own struggles that definitely prompt a response from us if we were to talk about it one on one. And so finding the message of what is going to actually trigger a response from them, what is going to make their life easier, their work easier. And I remember a specific situation where I finally found, a message that resonated. I had sent it in an email, newsletter email type thing, inviting them to try our platform. And something I had said, Converge was released in order to help you spend more time on data science and less on technical complexity. And what happened is I actually got responses from that message, even though it was clearly a marketing email. I actually got responses to my email that said, this actually corresponds to my personal needs. That is what somebody said. The technical complexity really resonated with me. I want more time to do what I was hired to do, which is, do data science to build algorithms. And I use that message to this day because I know I got multiple responses, and I knew that this was that's when I realized, okay, we're not trying to talk, we don't have to talk about ROI all the time. That's not what's going to trigger somebody to have an emotional response. What's really going to trigger somebody to have an emotional response is, how are we going to make your day better?
Yeah, and that is a beautiful moment. I mean, I love them. The best, explanation I've ever heard of advertising is the truth well told. And I think we as marketers, as advertisers, we're kind of diggers. We're kind of Sherlock Holmes, and we're digging to try to understand these people we're trying to reach as human beings, right? Not just, you just mentioned CRM, not just people in a CRM or database or whatever. These are real human beings, 3D, complex, emotional, who live lives just like us, and really try to understand them and how we can better serve them with our marketing and our products. And when you actually tap into that, that's finding some gold. And it's a beautiful thing to actually hear back from customers, not just to look at the numbers and see, what click-through rate do we get in this email, or how many leads or sales, but to actually hear back from other human beings and say, hey, wow, this reached me. And that's one reason, too, I'll just get on a soapbox a bit, because it sounds like you don't do this. The companies that send no reply emails, it drives me nuts to send an email and to say, hey, we want to get this message to you. We really could care less if you have any reply, what you can think about it, right? Email is a two-way medium. And if you make it a two-way medium, something beautiful happens. Like what happened to Maya is people will actually talk back to you. Sometimes it's complaints, which is good. You learn from that. But sometimes it's beautiful feedback like that. And I think, so I love that. I think that's a beautiful story. That's, honestly, some of my favorite moments in my career is not just, you got this many clicks or this many sales. I mean, that's important. You got to keep the company in business. But it's to hear from other human beings of how something affected them. And so I love that story.
Yeah, that's
I want to touch on a lesson you kind of hinted at. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say that even, negative responses are really awesome because you actually get a chance to interact with some of the people that you're trying to reach. And if they're having a negative reaction to some of the content that you're putting out there, you get to learn a lot about what they like and what they don't like. So it's super valuable, and definitely do not put a no reply.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I got to think now, everyone in the Marketing Sherpa audience. So obviously we're communicating to marketers about marketing. It's a high bar. And there have been so many times that we've gotten, there's this kind of perception that because we write about marketing, that everything we do would be flawless, right? But we are an organization like any other with limitations on time and priority and resources, and our fall will make mistakes. So Sometimes we get responses that, are just blown away how we could, mess something up, which I believe I do all the time. But a lot of times it's, it just helps make us better. So I'm always so thankful for the negative response, because I realize for every negative email you probably get, there's 10 or 20 or 100 or 1,000 people who just looked and you're like, what? Morons, or what's this garbage or whatever. So that one person who will actually write in and give you honest feedback, and now I'll probably get tons of negative emails about how bad this podcast is, but the people who actually write in and give you negative feedback, I mean, I've always thought that's a treasure. That's a gift. That's something to be so thankful for. So I've always appreciated that. And that's a great thing. So I started in my career probably a bit before you did, Maya, when I was writing print ads and some of these things. And they didn't have these feedback mechanisms like they do today. So that's why I just always encourage, anytime you're working in something digital that naturally has a feedback mechanism, my gosh, do not turn that off. That is an opportunity to learn.
Agreed.
So in the first half of the podcast, we talked about lessons you learned from some of the things you made. In the second half of the podcast, we talk about lessons from some of the people you collaborated with. And you hinted at this lesson before when you were talking about launching the virtual event. I think it applies to how you originally launched the webinars as well. Be bold, in all caps, bold. That's how bold you have to be. And you learned this lesson via Yochai Etun, the CEO of Converge.io. So how did you learn this lesson from Yochai?
Yeah. So when we started at Converge, I was very calculated. I wanted every single thing that I did to be, make sure everything was planned perfectly, that I understood everything, all the steps that needed to go into whether anything that I was doing, whether it was I was doing the best possible CTA for a landing page, I was creating the best possible website copy. Before I started the webinar, I had planned a month in advance, thinking, okay, a month, it's kind of a short amount of time, but I'll figure out how to send the emails, and I'll figure out how to set up all the automation to register everybody. And I need to figure out how to, get what video platform to use, and we need to create the slides and the whole presentation. And I was working on that, and then the CEO kind of came up to me, Yochai, so shout out to him. He said, Maya, come on, we can't wait a month. We need to get this in now. We need to start now. Other companies are already starting to make webinars. We need to get on there. Like, what's taking so long? It shouldn't be that hard. And, I was a little shaken up, but he said, let's schedule it for next week, or, in 2 weeks. And I said, oh my God, I panicked. That was my first reaction. And then, I got to work. We put up the landing page, figured it out. It wasn't that pretty, but it was fine. Got people to register. It was not a lot of people. Our first webinar was probably 10 people, which is a little bit embarrassing. But, the main thing was that we just got it up and running. We learned a ton in that webinar. And we already were on our second webinar 2 weeks later. So we already started building that program. Otherwise, if we hadn't just started, we probably would have come into the same issues, even if I had calculated and done everything I needed to do for a whole month. Probably it would have just delayed us. And so that was like one example of being bold. Of course, the same thing happened with our conference. I thought, oh, we need way more people to be able to put this on. Normally it's groups of 40 people who put on virtual events, but we did it with just a few people, and it came out even better than some of the ones where you're working with a lot of people to try and produce something. And so the real thing is you just have to sometimes be as bold as you can be. Try the things that are going to make you uncomfortable, and it doesn't always have to be perfect.
Yeah, this is something I've wrestled with in my career, because one thing I've noticed is a shift from, like I said, working in more print and traditional media. They have naturally longer deadlines and buildups just because they're, more complex, bigger budget, some of those things. Then moving into the digital space where, I mean, anyone can throw up a digital article, at the snap of the fingers, or just put up a webinar invite or some of these things. And so I think the thing I've wrestled with is, on the one hand, perfectionism, but on the other hand, sometimes you only get one bite at the apple. You know what I mean? You only get, when you're in front of people, that's your chance. They don't know your brand and they have an experience, and if it's too negative, you lose them. So I totally agree with you, but I also kind of balance it with, and what are your thoughts on, that's the thing I've always struggled with. What is the minimum awesome product, right? The minimum awesome product. So minimum in that, as you said, I know I'm a writer. A great quote I love is, "A book is never done; it's only due." Right. So obviously you need those due dates, print force due dates, and you don't have those as much. So on the one hand, it's got to be minimum so you can meet those dates with whatever minimal resources you have, or like you said, push them up and push and actually get that out. But there's got to be some level too of, if it's too weak, you've probably lost those people you've got in front of. I think. You rarely get a second chance. So how do you balance that in your career, Maya?
I think I'm constantly struggling with it because, on the one hand, I work with a lot of people who want it to just be out, and everything has a cost and a benefit. So even if you're putting something out there that's not perfect, yeah, you might get some negative reactions, but you'll also get some positive reactions. And if that's the case, it's worth it, because otherwise, if you're not doing it at all, you miss every chance you don't take. That is literally, how it works in marketing as well. And even if you have some bad experiences, I've found that even when we've put out, let's say we did a demo with a few hundred people, of a product that wasn't quite ready. We thought it would be. It had a few bugs, and people had to see that in the demo live. But the thing is, people were still interested in what it had to offer. And I think, you know, customers are still understanding of technology and digital environments, that there might be issues. It's, as great as your Wi-Fi can be, as great as your, uh, you know, platform can be, there's always going to be some issues. And I think people don't expect perfection. And if they still see value, you will end up with a positive reaction. But I think it's still better to do rather than to just wait until it's perfect.
Speaking of which, Maya was very kind to work through the audio issues we had at the beginning of trying to record this podcast. So, yeah, and I think
I could relate.
Yeah, maybe that's why it was top of mind. And I think the other thing that I found that relates to what we were saying earlier is, I think there's this idea I try to talk about, customer intimacy, like being close to your customers and understanding. And so when you are, even when you put out something that's not perfect, one, if you have that relationship where you're listening to them, you can learn pretty quick and hopefully pivot pretty quick about what is and isn't working. But the other thing too is, sometimes I've gotten some of the nastiest emails through, or just Marketing Sherpa has. And then when I respond, it's amazing how that person does a 180. And, I remember this years ago, it was from someone in the UK. It's like, oh, sorry, chap, I hadn't had my spot of tea today or whatever. Because I think we have this idea, because we've been abused by many big brands, like I said, the no reply emails, that there's no human on the other end. Right? B2B buyers are human. B2B marketers are human too. There's no human on the other end. And it's just this big monolith that's just shoving whatever down our throat. And, we had an issue with our hotel that morning, and our afternoon, our credit card. And then, in the evening, we get this email from this marketer. And it's enough, darn it. And, but when you actually respond with humanity, I think, people understand more and more forgiving and want to interact with your brand more. So I don't know. That's what I've seen.
Yeah, I would say that I've also seen the same thing. And also, when we started off, our product had so many bugs, and our CTO was working, shout out to Leah Colbin. She's an awesome CTO and co-founder of Converge. And every single customer had a personal relationship with her. And to this day, they still mention that she was one of the main reasons why they chose Converge, because they felt she made them feel like a partner in the product. And even though, yeah, they couldn't finish their job for that day. They felt heard and they felt like we could deliver, whatever it is that they needed. And the main thing was that they felt heard and they didn't even care if there were bugs in our product and hiccups in the beginning because overall they were listened to. And some of the bigger companies that we were competing with, they don't have that interface. And that was something that helped us get started.
And I think it ties very well into the next lesson that you want to talk about, which is learn as you go, as we mentioned. You said you learned this from Gil Weitzman, the VP of Marketing, Yaniv Goldberg, the head of growth, and Naama Greenswag, the community manager, all of them at Converge.io. And we touched on this a bit, but how else did you learn this lesson, learn as you go? Seems vital to startups.
Yes, very vital. We have had a lot of brand new projects that we've never done before. We're not a very established company. And so every single project that we're doing is new, even if it's a new partnership or if it's a new product release. We've never done it before, or a new conference for that matter. And so we've always, I give a lot of props to Gil, our VP of marketing, whose philosophy has always been that as long as we're really willing to try anything, and he always wants to try everything. And as long as we learn from what we've tried, he's happy to try it. And, we had tried to adjust quickly and we're open to surprises, and normally we get a success. We just push ourselves to try new things and adjust quickly, and that is how it goes. And the thing is with marketing, and I think any possible job out there, maybe the secret is that no one has done everything, and things are evolving so quickly that it's really hard to keep up with every single best SEO practice or best digital marketing practice. And you always have to, especially in marketing, adjust and try new things and stand out. So no one is an expert, because I think that for marketers, an evolving marketer, somebody who's always trying new things and testing new things out and willing to learn new things is a better marketer. Those are the ones that are going to succeed. But if you're kind of stuck in your ways, you may end up just doing one thing and being only good at that one thing, but you may not move on beyond that. And if you're willing to learn new things and try new things, those will be the successful marketers.
And when you talk about learn as you go, can you think of a specific example of something you learned that made you have to pivot in the middle of a project, right? You're going one way, you learn something, oh no, we got to totally do something different. So for example, we teach a lot about A/B testing, right? And when you're engaged in testing, you can see very clearly that sometimes a thing you think will win will actually lose in the end, right? I like to call this negative lifts. We did a webinar on it because negative, because the results are down, of course, but lift because if you conduct the test in a scientific manner, you should learn something from that negative result, right? That could help you in your future efforts. So can you think of anything, Maya, where, you're in the middle of a project, you learn as you go, you learn this thing and you have to pivot in some other direction that you didn't originally foresee?
Well, I think it almost happens every day for us.
Oh, great.
There will be projects that we're working on, let's say, whether it's trying to put together a white paper, which is something that we have, I've done multiple times where I'm actually finding writers and taking excerpts and working really hard on a white paper that really just never comes into fruition. And it happens pretty often. You kind of just have to pivot and find whatever it is that is going to be the next thing. I'll mention our conference again. We only had, a few months to put on a conference. And when we first started, we had zero plans. We didn't even have, actual KPIs. We didn't have any benchmarks to go by. So we were just kind of winging it. Um, and we thought, okay, maybe we'll just have 10 speakers. And the moment we got 40 speakers, we had to accommodate those 40 speakers. So we quickly had to pivot, find, you know, scale our conference within 1 month and figure out how to make this run. I give a lot of credit to, again, Lisa Gregory events. She was super hands-on and helped us actually make it happen. Super stressful. But ultimately it made our conference so much better. And if we had said in the beginning, before we even started planning this conference, okay, let's aim for 40 speakers, let's aim for this many 5,000 registrants, I would have been like, are you kidding me? There's not a chance that that's going to happen, because we have no benchmarks. We have no idea how this is going to go. But what happened was that the next time we had a conference, we were able to have those really lofty goals. We said, let's have 60 speakers next time, and let's get, 9,000 registrants. And I was like, okay, that's crazy, but maybe doable. And we actually exceeded 9,000 registrants. We got to 10,000 registrants. And we had 60 speakers, and it was super successful. So I'm curious to see, I think our next conference, we're trying to get 30,000 registrants.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
congratulations.
So we'll need your entire audience to join.
There you go. If you want to learn about AI and machine learning and data science, check it out. Last lesson you mentioned, roll with the punches. You learned it from Leah Colburn, the CTO, and again, Yochai Atun, the CEO, both at Converge.io. And how did you learn this lesson, Maya?
Yeah. So as you can imagine, in a startup, there's a ton of change constantly. Priorities are really shifting all the time. Every second of the day, one day you could be trying to create pitch decks for your investors, and all of the focus of the company is on that. And then the next day, we're really focused on this new release, let's say the launch of a new product. And then the day before the release, they say, actually, let's postpone this for 4 months. And then you have to figure out what's next. Or actually, last minute, this is happening or that is happening. Maybe in one of our webinars, somebody didn't come to the webinar, and that's like the main speaker. And we have to figure it out because there's 100 people registered to come. Which, by the way, all of these things have happened. So the main thing is you kind of just have to roll with it, and don't get, personally upset if something isn't happening or isn't going as expected, because I think the main thing is that you have to, part of your job as a marketer or is to be a problem solver, and to expect things to go wrong or expect things to change. And what your job is really to find a solution. And one thing that Leah and Yochai have always said, and I give them a ton of credit as our leaders, is that there's this saying in Hebrew. We're an Israeli company. I didn't mention it before, but there's a saying in Hebrew that is lo Nora, which means kind of like, it's not a big deal, don't worry about it. It's not a problem. And even when we have had so many issues, or, let's say we don't get a PR approved or something, they just say, lo Nora, we'll move on. And that's incredible, because I mean, having those leaders that don't get upset over all these changes, because all these problems can happen. That's literally business. So it's really nice to have leaders that are just already ready to move on, say lo Nora, brush it off, and move on.
I like that. Lo Nora. I'm going to use that from
Yeah.
now on. Well, We talked about so many different factors in being a marketer, working at a startup, being a business person. So wonder, what are the key personal characteristics and qualities of an effective marketer in your opinion, Maya? I interviewed Mary Rogers, the head of marketing and communications at Cuisinart, in an earlier episode of the How I Made It Marketing podcast. And she had this great story, speaking of rolling with the punches, that made me think of her story as well, where she just started in her career at dance right out of college. She got to this booth at some giant, McCormick Convention Center in Chicago. Nothing showed up, and she had to figure out how to roll the punches. And she worded her lesson this way: a never give up attitude, resourcefulness, and tenacity are some of the personal characteristics that serve you well no matter what field you are practicing in. So I wonder, in your opinion, Maya, what do you think those key qualities are of an effective marketer?
So I cannot agree more with that. I've also been in that situation where you show up to a conference and there is nothing is going as planned. You just have to assume the worst. So I would say that, yes, tenacity and resourcefulness are super key, especially when you're working through a startup. You need to be resourceful. You might not have a budget, or you probably won't. And if you do, it's not going towards marketing, let's just say. It's going towards anything else. So being resourceful is going to get you a long way. And the other thing is, be an evolving marketer. Anybody who's willing to learn on the way and not get stuck in, okay, this is how I've done it before, will end up being successful. So if you're willing to learn and willing to teach yourself and kind of bootstrap things together, I think those two qualities, the resourcefulness and, the ability to learn, are going to be your biggest assets in any job. And you can pretty much tackle anything. You can go from startup marketing manager to, director of marketing in an Intel company. That's a huge jump in 3 years. And I think it's all due to those two factors.
Well, very nice, Maya. Thank you so much for this discussion. I've learned so much from your journey.
Thank you so, so much for having me. It's been really a pleasure, and I'm really happy to get to talk to your audience and to talk to you. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And thanks to everyone for listening. Hopefully we play a small part in your evolving career as a marketer.
Thank you for joining us for How I Made It in Marketing with Daniel Burstein. Now that you've gotten inspiration for transforming yourself as a marketer, get some ideas for your next marketing campaign from Marketing Sherpa's extensive library of free case studies at marketingsherpa.com. That's marketingsherpa.com.